Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And Huntworth has just added a bunch of new stuff to their clearance section. Notably on there, their Holton, their heavyweight windproof. It's not the heat boost, but it is an incredible value. It's actually the first stuff that I got from the first Huntworth pieces that I got. I didn't even get them from Huntworth. And super warm, very, very capable pieces, and very good value right now in their clearance section. So go over there and check those out. And then I did just talk to Nate. We are going to be giving away one of those Grayling hoodies, and then a hat and glove combo for this quarterly giveaway, which is coming up at the end of the month. So go over to patreon.com/Bowhunter Chronicles podcast and check that out. Got to give a shout out to our newest Patreon from St. Joe, Michigan, Ben Villamore. I think he's going to head up to the Patreon hunt. Got that coming up here. Man, I am freaking, my basement is a mess. I'm getting everything ready for Colorado. Trying to get everything ready for the youth hunt this weekend. Taking my daughter out for that. So that's going to be fun. Come back for our opener, and then roll that right into the Patreon hunt. So, man, we are in it. It's great to be able to see all these deer. You know, I've got like that velvet envy, right? So I did a bunch of scouting lately, getting out there, and it's like, man, and now I've got all this stuff before we could actually go out and start bow hunting. We do have that early doe hunt that's available here in Michigan now on public land. So maybe I'll try and get out on that. I got to work that weekend, but maybe once I get out, I can slip out for a couple hours and just see, just get in the tree again, and really looking forward to that. Shout out to our partners here. We talk about the Patreon giveaway stuff. Huntworth, Latitude, Big Shot Targets, Lucky Buck, Canadian Zinger, Genesis 3D, Spartan Forge, this podcast with Spartan Forge, and Latitude. You can save 15% over there using code BHC. And, we're Huntworth guys through and through, but I got to tell you, that new Latitude stuff with the reel tree just freaking looks amazing. That old school reel tree on the pouches, and then on that new Maverick saddle. Really, really awesome stuff. That stuff looks slick. I know we don't need camo and all that. And I did get one of their Ranger 22 packs. Really nice pack. I think it's going to be great. I'm going to use it as a day pack out in Colorado to kind of put it through the paces, see what I like. First impressions is that, I saw it at ATA, but I didn't get to carry it around and mess with it, anything like that. But it's made of really thick, almost like the Kafaru material. Very, very overbuilt. And it's a little heavier than I expected it to be, but yeah, that just lends to the what I'm expecting of durability and longevity of it. So, Latitude, check them out, code BHC. Spartan Forge, we're going to talk about that on this podcast. You can use code Bowhunter to save 25%. And man, this podcast with Bill, Bill's been on a lot of podcasts, and we've had him on multiple times. We've talked through, Spartan Forge, the different iterations, all that stuff. And on this one, honestly, we talk a little bit about, the features and kind of the stuff about the Lidar, things like that. But we talk more about technology and hunting, like the new school versus the old school. Last time we had Bill on, we talked about him having roots in the rendezvous community, and hunting with self bows and all that sort of stuff. And we kind of take that one further and talk about AI, about not only just in hunting, but in life, and kind of where that is going and taking us, and how far is too far. And then get into some really great tactics and hunt talk. So, and kind of how it all kind of melds together, and the at least Spartan Forge and Bill's ideas on where, at least with Spartan Forge and some of the stuff they're doing with AI, where that fits into the overall picture of hunting, and moreover, kind of like learning about hunting and where to be, that sort of thing. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. I know I say that every single time, and I truly believe that, but this one has a really good conversation, as we're moving forward into this world of like, oh, can we use drones? Can we use cell cameras? Can we use, AI, all the mapping, all of these different things. So I think, again, this is just a really good conversation, not only to listen to on a podcast, but I think it's a conversation that we need to be having with ourselves and, talking to our hunting buddies about, and kind of as we move forward through this world of technology. So as always, thank you guys for listening. Enjoy the episode. All right, everybody. Adam back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And today we have Mr. Machine Learning, the Spartan Forge. I don't know, the techiest hunter that you're probably ever going to meet. Bill Thompson, one of the creators with Spartan Forge. And we're going to talk, we're going to go off a little bit about the whole technology in the deer woods today. Is kind of the direction I want to take this. So, Bill, how are you doing?
Doing well. I'm out here in North Dakota with my son, where my father built this cabin in the 80s. He died in 88, and I finally saved enough money to buy it back. So I bought it back about 2 years ago, and I've been working on it. We're actually producing a little bit of a film series about it, because I'm using Spartan Forge to work on the cabin. We can talk about that later if you want. But I'm doing really well, gearing up for an elk hunt in Montana that I think is going to be really cool. And I think people are going to enjoy it. And yeah, I'm doing really well.
Yeah, I'm getting ready. So for me, I can't imagine. Well, I guess we'll start this way. So when you started this whole thing and you said, okay, we're going to use this hunting for machine learning and all this stuff, how did you think that was going to go, ending up in the hunting industry? Because you're what, 3-4 years into this now, and now you're smack dab in the middle of the hunting industry. Did you think like, oh yeah, I'll be able to hunt, it's going to be great? Or did you think you're going to be flying around like trying to squeeze in stuff like wherever you could?
I definitely thought, and I think I was correct, like the first 2 years of Spartan Forge, I did no hunting. Like, I think I went out, like I did like a doe hunt with the Seek One guys in like 2021. And otherwise I didn't hunt that year. And then 2022, I think I hunted 3 times and did the doe hunt again. And it wasn't until last year that I actually got to go, and like I took a week off and focused on hunting, and ended up in that week taking 2 really good bucks. And I just like was so thankful to get it out of my system, because I was like, if I don't get something in this week, like I'm going to shoot the first spike on day 4 that comes by. Like I just needed to get out of my system. So I definitely knew, or I had the idea, not trying to name drop, but he's the guy who said it, so I'll say it. When I first brought Levi Morgan on the Pro Staff, we talked, we were staying out somewhere before we did a film shoot. And he said, the thing about being in the hunting industry when you're making products is you almost have to say goodbye to hunting for the first few years. And so that kind of prepped me for it. And I thought, yeah, that makes sense. So I thought I'd be hunting later. And now last year I got to do a little bit. And this year I've got a lot more on the schedule. We'll see how that actually goes. But I've got an elk hunt planned. I've got a pronghorn hunt planned. I've got a whitetail week planned. So, that's 3 weeks of hunting this year. So I'm thankful for that. So it's just one of those things when you're trying to launch a product and all of your free time goes into it, you kind of know that you have to sacrifice everything else. So for those first 2 years, I kind of lived vicariously through people who are using the app or sending me photos and just saying like, all right, and I'm helping other people hunt. So it's kind of like being a guide or an outfitter or something like that. So yeah, I'm not complaining.
Now, do you think that's like your personality, that it's like this is your pet project, or or is this the way that you are with like everything, or do you feel like because everything is happening like in real time and trying to keep up with it is just too much?
Um, it's too much. Yeah, like Spartan Forge, especially in the first 2 years, 2.5 years, I was doing like the first time that we talked, I was still active duty, and I was doing 8 hour, 9 hour days as a soldier. Then I'd go home and do 5, 6 hours on Spartan Forge. Um, and it's kind of my personality. When I dive into something, I have an addictive personality, so I'm kind of all in, or I don't do it at all. Um, so when Spartan Forge became my full time job, and we sold enough subs that first year that we knew we could at least subsidize portions of our life, then I just went all in and just totally committed myself to it. So yeah, I mean, it is who I am. I did this. I've told the story on other podcasts, but I did this. My father-in-law told me when I was like 22. I had no interest in golf at all. In fact, I still don't like it. But he's like, you'll never become a good golfer. So I was like, you know what? Fuck this guy. I'm gonna work my butt off for 2 years and become a better golfer than him. And in like 2 years, I became like a 3 handicap golfer. And I was always golfing. I'd wake up and golf. I'd go home and golf. It just became an addiction for me. So I have a very addictive personality. I think it's actually from having ADHD. ADHD is bad when you're trying to learn a lot of things, but what it allows you to do is focus singularly on one thing and forget everything else, to the detriment of my life. But it's certainly been helpful in this regard, because I just singular focus and I go at it, and that's just how I am with things. So yeah, it's played itself out kind of the way I thought it would.
So in that time frame from when you were on active duty building this thing after hours to full-time job to kind of where you're at now, maybe getting a little bit of time to hunting to hunt, right? What has changed in like the technology world and in the industry, within the hunting industry? Because it's in the real world out here, we're seeing all of this other AI, we're seeing all of this other technology that's creeping in, and whether it was, COVID kind of expedited that.
For sure.
But how has that changed like the industry, like from your end, as far as like what you're trying to impart on the hunting industry?
So there's three questions there. I think is kind of like, how's the hunting industry changed? How's the technology changed? And then how has what was the third one there? The third one was, there's a third question in there, and what was it? I forget. I'm sorry. I was trying to listen to you and compute.
Yeah,
I'll answer the first two. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll say, yeah, I do that all the time because I have like these big long thoughts. So
yeah, so I'll hit the first two, and then maybe you'll remember what the third one was. So definitely one thing that has changed for me in the hunting industry, and I'll say this from like a 30,000 foot level, because now I'm working with other brands, and we're doing some stuff with Hoyt right now that I think is going to be really exciting for people, and some other companies. And when I first joined the hunting industry, or I should say, when I first got into hunting seriously, it was all public land. Like that was all everyone ever talked about. It was just like public land hunting, public land hunting. And it was almost like crapped on if you hunted private land, or like you had your own lot, or you were in on a lease or whatever. Like you were just automatically not assumed to not be a real hunter. Or at least that was the culture that I was in with hunting at that time. And I public land hunted, so I probably participated in that culture. And that was probably like the height of like the hunting public and those guys. Not that they're not big now, but I mean, you know, 2015, 2016, it was really all about that. And I would say in the past 2 years, there's definitely been markets opening up, and people now talking more and more about doing land management and private land. And it's not as big as public hunting, I don't think, but it's gotten bigger and more talked about. So that used to be everything, when you think like 2005 to like 2012 or 2013, it was all like everyone's trying to find private land, and no one's thinking about public land hunting. Everyone is, watching the Drurys or watching Lee and Tiffany, and everyone's trying to get on, alfalfa and cornfields and all of that stuff. And then it swung like politics. It swung to public land hunting, which I think is a good thing. I like the industry when it's like 60% public mobile hunters, 40%, everyone wants to own their own big plot of land. And I finally have one. So, everyone wants that, right, for themselves. If you can share it it's a better way to share it. I think getting kids into hunting is easier on private land. And I think I turned my son off permanently to hunting by making him walk with me on public land. And like when he was like 9, he'd walk in a mile or a mile and a half with me, and I just wore him out. But now there's definitely a lot more of the public land stuff, and culturally you'll see like programs like We Are Hunter, where those guys are really into, how do we make shot plots, like the Bill Winke kind of thing, or, how do we manage land better? What are we doing for that type of stuff? So that has been like the most stark change to me culturally from hunting, for observing the hunting industry now, pretty, like really paying attention to it and the marketing and like what sells for the past 5 years. And in the last 2 years, I think it's definitely that swing has kind of happened. So that's the cultural. On the technology side, I agree with you. I think COVID really amplified app usage and doing stuff from home and ordering and Amazon and DoorDash, and people are spending, I think, more time, and it's not a good thing. People are spending more time on their phones now, which I also think that pendulum's going to swing as well. That's my prediction anyway. It's my hope that in 5 years or 3 years, being on a phone at a table when you're visiting with people will be looked at like smoking or something like that. You know what I mean? Like people will be like, hey, dude, get off your phone. Like, I'm a human here. Pay attention to me. Like, you're out with us. Get off your phone. Whereas right now, when you watch kids when they're out or at the dinner table or in restaurants, everyone's, on their phone going nuts. I think that will swing too. Everything swings, right? It goes back and forth. But, and that sounds weird coming from a guy making an app, but my app is to get people outside, and the technology that I'm trying to bring them to minimize the amount of time they have to spend away from their families while they're doing it, and maximizing their digital scouting that can be done from home, so that when they do get to go out and scout preseason or in the season or whatever, that they're maximizing the time that they're spending. And if they don't want to do that, and they just want to use it for pins or whatever, that's fine too, like not getting lost in the dark. But definitely the technology and everything happening with AI and the growth of AI. I guess it's one thing. I'm not bragging, but I'll say, I would say 7 or 8 years ago, I was putting together AIs when no one really even knew what it was about. And it wasn't like in the lexicon, people weren't talking about it. And I knew that Spartan Forge was going to be an AI, the base of the company would be an AI. And we've done that. We just released Cyber Scout, which is this like online, think of it as like a chat bot, like a chat GPT only for hunters. We started developing that 3 years ago. So, we're way ahead. If anyone else wanted to do this, they'd have to spend millions of dollars to get it done quickly and do it at the quality level that we have. So I predicted this curve when I started seeing what AI was doing for us when we were in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I put all of my cards into that. And I think that's been borne out, because now you're starting to see the larger companies start talking about it and how they're going to integrate it or whatever. So definitely app usage, phone usage, mobile development is all on an up curve right now. But I do think in the next few years, it will go back down again.
So with that, in the last time we had you on the podcast, I think we talked about your roots in like the rendezvous and hunting in moccasins with self bows and things like that. And so when we talk about AI and we look to kind of where we're at as technology and hunting, now we're saying, okay, we've got cell cams, now we've got on demand sell video cameras. We've got drones where, depending on where you are, you may be able to like legally scout with a drone. So when you,
Yeah.
and so your cyber scout, and I've seen it like work in, you were showing it to us at the NRA show in Pennsylvania. Like at the core is a great thing to, if that's how it's used to help people answer questions that they need in real time, or new people that are hunting. But what about the moccasin wearing self bow guy who's trying to hunt those same properties, or is the neighboring property of the private land that you're talking about, and you got drones flying all over, and you got guys like, so at what point does it become not hunting anymore?
That's an interesting question. So, I mean, the first thing that I'll say about this is, people, and this is just my advice, take it or leave it, like you're a grain of salt. You should, just like if someone were to ask me about, like, my wife and I are both, my wife's a mathematician, 2 degrees in mathematics, got her master's from Hopkins, way smarter than me. I went for engineering. We both, though, are math geeks. And anybody who would ask me the same question about mathematics, I would say, hey, look, you need to learn how to do it on paper first. You need to learn how to do long division. You need to learn how to do algebra on a piece of paper with a pencil. You need to, like all of these things, you need to learn that first. And then you go to calculators and graphing calculators and computers and MATLAB, and then learn it that way. So that you're grounded in both like where the technology came from and where the technology is going. So that's my advice for hunters, right? Like if you're going to leverage these types of capabilities, and that's why we created Cyber Scout, so that uh, if you are a single kid in a house in the southwest of Chicago and you watch a Seek One video and you want to go knock on some doors and hunt, if that's not in the house and you don't have anybody who hunts, Cyber Scout will be that resource where you can learn the groundwork of hunting and like where these things come from and how to do it and what to practice and what kind of bow you need, or where to find bargain bows, or where to get like what camo you should get, or where you can get it at a garage sale or whatever, or that you don't need it in the first place, really, if you're willing to just stay extra still. So Cyber Scout was built using AI to give that foundational knowledge to people who don't either have the time to do the research or the access to the resources to do the research. So my highest value, and I hope I haven't said this before, but if I have, I'm sorry, fast forward 15 seconds. My highest value is that, and I just actually got a text from a guy this morning who was using the slope angle and Lidar, and located some elk bedding and stalked an elk and killed an elk yesterday using Spartan Forge. My highest value is that some kid reaches out and says, I watched the Cam Hanes video or something, or Joe Rogan or something, didn't know where to start, didn't know anybody that did it. I went on and got my free app for Spartan Forge. I knew where the property lines were. I decided to buy Cyber Scout, and I educated myself, and now my single mother, who's a waitress, I just brought home 40 pounds of venison, and she cried herself to sleep that night. Like that to me is the highest value. That's really what I'm going after, is educating our youth on the importance of conservation and hunting and doing something on your own. And so that's what I'm leveraging the technology for. As far as drawing the line on where technology is too much, that to me is a very contextual question. So if a guy is, grown up hunting and now wants to get his son into it, but he's, runs his own welding shop and he works 60 hours a week, but he still wants to get that experience and he wants to have success, and he doesn't have access to land, so it needs to be public land. And he's going to use the resources in Spartan Forge and he's going to leverage the technology as much as possible to create a circumstance for him and his son to have a memorable hunt that they'll never forget. And we're involved in that by 2%. then in that regard, in that case, I would say use all of the technology that you can. Like if you don't have the time, if you've only got 4 hours a week or less, and you've got to know when to go and where to go, and that's going to be your only way to do it because that's your job, and that's, you've got to provide for your family first as a father or as a mother. Then I would say use as much as you can. Use as much technology. If somebody's going to fly a drone, and I'm not saying we should be using drones to hunt deer, but if someone's going to fly some drones and look at where they're mapping, and that guy's doing it because his kid and him have 4 hours on, on Memorial or on Veterans Day weekend, and that's how they're putting meat on the table. Like for me, technology is there to help, and you should be as aggressive as possible. But and that's just me. That's my personal belief. Now, I think there is a line where you shouldn't be using them while you're hunting, or you can use them to recover a deer. Certainly you should be able to use them to recover deer. If you shot a deer, and we all have bad shots, everyone's going to make a bad shot. And if you liver shot a deer or you gut shot a deer, and you have the opportunity and it's legal, which it should be legal everywhere on tracking, I think so, to go and recover that deer so that the meat doesn't go to waste, or your time's not up and you don't have time to hunt, then again, I'm aggressive about technology. I'm very bullish about people using technology. I think, however, though, when time does make itself available, or if you are trying to better yourself as a hunter, then you should really focus on using none of that stuff other than the safety aspect of it, like, getting yourself out of the woods when you're turned around. I think you should learn all of that stuff and rely on it, and build yourself up as a hunter so that you're a complete persona when it comes to being a hunter. And like I said with mathematics before, like I wouldn't want someone just throwing something into an AI that's going to spit the answer out. And if we built our science and technology and engineering culture on that, then we're dependent. And if the lights go out, or if you don't have access to those things and you need it, you're screwed. And it's the same thing with being a hunter. Like I think you have to have that, both feet, a foot in the past and a foot in the future. And that to me is the well-rounded hunter. So I've actually packed my moccasins for this elk hunt, not because they're silent and I like how they feel. And also I like putting them on after I've been wearing the same pair of boots for like 3 days. I like getting into the moccasins. They're nice and quiet and they feel good. And, they can help with the stock. I can be way quieter with those than I can with any pair of shoes. So to me, it's about balance, and that, and the technology going too far. We're using apps to order cows that have been slaughtered by a nameless person that are being delivered to your front door, and something like 90% of the US population's used it. So you can't really judge a guy who's putting meat on the table, who's just using technology in that regard, but you're not going to look at yourself when you are able to order, Baltimore crab and have it shipped overnight to your house in Michigan. Like those two people, what is the difference? Like, what are we getting at here? For me, it becomes an ego thing when you see people. It's fascinating to me that I'll see people on social media. Like I have this post about Lidar that we put out, and by the way, I mean lots of people use it. They'll be like, crapping on the technology of using something like Lidar, which is a fantastic tool, but they're complaining about using technology on the largest human digital network that's ever been deployed in the history of the universe that we know about. So you are using the most technologically advanced large platform that's ever been developed for human interaction to complain about technology. Like that's a paradox. That is, you can't, like, you need to send that complaint via courier pigeon if you're going to complain about that, because what the platform that you're complaining on is far more advanced than the platform that you're complaining about. And it's just that you're using it for communication while someone else is using it for food or sustenance or entertainment. So what is, like, how do we judge that? How do you say one's right or one's wrong? So that's a long answer. And you know me by now, this has got to be our fourth podcast. I have no short answers. So I apologize to your listeners.
No, I think, in there though, like with the mathematics, right? I mean, it kind of goes to like the whole AI model where now you're getting kids that, everybody just wants everything so quickly, right?
Yeah.
And so they're just writing papers with Chat GPT. They're just plugging everything in, and they're not learning. And I think that's where people have a disconnect when you start to impart that upon something that we all love so much and we take
Yeah.
pride in. And then, you know, it's hard because it is your product and all of these things, and it comes across that is very wholesome, right? If we think about like guys that are just filling the freezer and all these things, but I think in normal use case, or like the guys in, and I feel like we end up in this weird spot because we all want the same thing and we're all doing the same thing, and it's a very big echo chamber. So the net that is cast by this thing is much bigger than like the laser focus that we have, but everybody sees it as, you know, you want to kill a big deer. Oh, it's the easy button, big deer, big bucks. And then my buck, that sort of thing. So it's interesting there because I think it that's the way that it's seen as the easy button rather than like technology as a whole, right?
Yeah, and definitely, like all technology, it can be abused that way. It can be abused as an easy button. Anyone can do it, and you can do it in any capacity. And that's why I encourage people to learn it from the ground up. But again, like we live in a world today where free time is the economy sucks. Free time is very short. You need to feed your family, and you need to put a roof over their heads and pay the rent. And so if you only have those few amount of hours, like I'm not going to judge someone that is going to employ some technology to keep their love of this pursuit or their ability to pass it on to their kids. When the inflation is 9%, and if there's an opportunity to work, they need to be working because they need to put money or food on the table. I don't. I have plenty of things wrong on a personal level, like on my level as a person, things that I'm trying to improve about myself, both as a father, as a hunter, as a provider, that I don't need to judge anyone else on how they comport themselves or live their life. And I think the world would be a better place if people just focused on making themselves better and improving the things that they know about themselves that are falling short. Because at the end of the day, that's what most online complaining is. It's projection. Like they have things about themselves that they don't like. They have things about their own personality and their own pursuits and where they value themselves and their time. And they look at what they're doing and they don't confront it and deal with it. So what they do is they go online and they find someone who's doing what they are themselves doing, and they yell at them and they complain at them, and they're projecting their own inadequacies on this other person because it lets the vent off. And for me, that's not like I'm 31. I can't go out and correct the world. I don't have a place to do that. I don't have the time or the effort, and I've got more important crap going on than to go and tell someone else how they should be living their own life. I have way too much I need to fix first. And I think, just writ large, become a society where we are we are ascribing ourselves virtue by judging others. So because it's easy and you can be right, you can actually go and watch like a Bomar video or something and say, hey, dude, you shouldn't be doing that. It's bad for hunting. And you're feeding his machine and you're maximizing his exposure. And I've also got nothing against Josh Bomar. Like I met him a few weeks ago and seems like a perfectly nice guy. I wouldn't do some of the things that he does, but I'm sure if somebody followed me around with a camera, someone would look at that film and say, I wouldn't do half of what Bill Thompson does either. But I'm not going to judge him. I have no room to do it because I've got my own crap that I need to fix. So, and then you can make the argument, well, this hurts hunting writ large. And to that, I would say there are 500,000 hunters in Pennsylvania that aren't registered to vote. And there are 750,000 in North Carolina that aren't registered to vote. There's something like 300,000 in Texas that aren't registered to vote. We're going to hurt ourselves as hunters, and we're going to watch our culture go down the tubes way quicker by not being at the ballot box and making sure that we're preserving our culture through the ballot box, and making sure that we're holding local, state, and federal government accountable, because they're our servants. That is what is going to, because the argument gets made, well, he's hurting hunting, and then that makes PETA upset, or that makes someone upset, and then they go and write their congressman. And it's like, that wouldn't matter if, the election the federal election in Georgia was decided by 1,600 votes. The Georgia gubernatorial votes there was 1,600 votes that decided that. So if we think that that is the way that we're going to solve hunting and the culture of hunting going forward by crapping on Josh Bomar, we would solve it a lot better by just not paying attention to him. And so many hunters will pay attention and complain every video. So again, that's my thing, is I got to fix myself, and I'm not going to judge how someone else lives their life. And as long as they're doing things legally and within the prescription of the law, and they're maximizing their time to go outdoors and spend time with their family, then more power to you.
It's funny that you said that right there, legally, because when you were talking about that, obviously maybe not obviously, but what came to my mind when you were just saying, like, okay, people just need to put food on the table. I was just thinking about, like, some of the oldest of technology that is a spotlight and a, high powered rifle, because that's the area that I live in. And, to that point, I feel like there are some people out there that are very much sustenance hunters, that are, they find themselves in a spot, and, but those aren't, I feel like, and I had the Prince of Poachers on, and I got a lot of pushback on that, because the guy's just, he did a lot of bad things. However, I feel like that was because it was for big bucks. And I think that that's where it all boils down to. I think if somebody shot a deer and used every single piece of it, to feed their families and their dogs, and, to kind of stay afloat, is a much bigger difference than people who are doing things for the biggest buck. And that's the whole thing, is like, I don't know if it's the industry machine that drives it, and that drives this wedge in between people. And I've heard it said, hunting is a jealous man's sport. And I think that that's like the worst possible, like, take on it, because it's, you versus the animal. But I think as we get into these echo chambers, as we see social media, as technology, trail cam pictures, blah, 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 it's my deer, we're starting naming deer, all of these different things. I think that that's what drives a wedge. And you're 100% right. I mean, I just did a podcast, like 2-hour podcast, about, like, the Michigan legislature with how the deer season is managed and the conservation, our stuff. And it's just wild. It is solved by the ballot box, but at the same time, they're just deer or elk or, whatever. Like, this is something that we love. Like, why drive a wedge between us,
Yeah, exactly. We have a shirt coming out with Spartan Forge in about a month. And I don't know if you remember the old Benjamin Franklin cartoon that he published during the Revolutionary War, but it had a snake on it that was split into 13 pieces, and it says "Unite or Die." I'm doing a shirt like that'll say "Hunt or Die," and then it'll have at the head, it'll be like primitive bow for the first part, and then muzzleloader, and then compound bow, and then rifle, and then at lattle or something, and then the ass will be a crossbow. But so, like, what I'm saying with that is we all need to unite, around our culture, or we're going to watch it go away. Look at what's happening in Massachusetts. They're making people register muzzleloaders. Like that, like, I can hear George Washington right now. Like, my buddies and I would be stacking bodies. Like, we're not doing that. Like it's already too much. Registering AR-15s is too much. I don't care. I'm happy to debate anybody on the merits of gun registration and the purpose of the Second Amendment. But the other point about that I was going to make is, and I'll say this, and it's very, I haven't thought through this 100%, but it's fine. Like the podcasts are about exchanging ideas. And one of the ideas that I've been floating around in my head is, if you have the property or the access to the private property, I'm not saying you could do it on public land, but if you have access to private property and or you own the property, and you want to shoot a doe with a spotlight to put meat in the freezer, you should be able to do that once a year. No bucks, like we're not doing this like we're shooting a 180-inch deer because that's the only time you see it. But if you're like, look, I'm gonna get a sustenance tag, and because if the government can do it, which the government does it all the time, they send people into national parks, they send people into everywhere, and the government gets to do it. The government can't grant itself a power that they won't give their citizens. It's unconstitutional. It's so if, to me, if Bill Thompson were president or governor or whatever, I would allow for a sustenance tag, where if you got a property in North Dakota and you make $18,000 a year and you've got deer out in the back every night and you've got and you own the property and there's not, like, you might have to submit a map to show that there's not like a house right on the other side of it or something like that, or whatever, right? Like there's a safety aspect that has to be abided by. But once you nail down what those safety aspects are, if you are making 17 or 18 grand a year out here in North Dakota and you don't have the time off, and you want to spotlight a doe to put meat in the freezer, 100%. Like that 100% should be legal. Like, to me. And again, like, I could be wrong about this, and there's a reason why I'm not the president or the game commissioner. But that's where my head's at right now. And I'm happy to have that debate with people. And maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I have that debate with someone else and they point out to me my logical error. But to me, it's food. And if the point of it is food and it's your property and your land that you've paid for, it should be 100% legal in my mind.
And so to me, like, I think it to me goes back to like that incredible Bill Thompson dichotomy, because to me that's the moccasin guy talking, right? Not the AI guy talking. Like
probably, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm an extremist. I really am. I'm extreme on all of my views. I know that. Because I chase the logic of them, and I'm trying to figure out, like, what is hunting about? Ultimately, hunting is about food. And that's the purpose. And so if the purpose is food, then why are we telling this dad who's working 60 hours a week welding or whatever the job is, it doesn't matter, that he on his own property can't pull 60 pounds of venison out for him and his kids to eat cheap, organic, 17 cents for a bullet, cheap, organic food for his whole family. Whereas the government solution is, no, go spend $8 at McDonald's and poison them. Like that is what the government will tell you.
So, like, on that note, does that, I mean, I guess it kind of goes back to that, like, thing about, like, does that constitute hunting, right? Because, I mean, that to me, that's like where people's minds are blown. Like, not the idea that someone would kill something on their own property to feed their family, but it's like, well, that's not hunting, because I mean, the rifle hunting isn't hunting. There's so many things, because we want to put ourselves in this box of saying, like, this is, and you pointed it out for, like, the negative aspects, I guess, but I think, like, and not to say that it's good, but that people will say, like, well, hell, we're a bow hunting podcast. Like, we're bow hunters. That's what we do.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's because I'm better than people. I'll joke around, but it's like, I would just like to make things more difficult because I'm,
I'm the same way. Like, I always bow hunt. I will always, I very rarely use a rifle. I might use a flintlock. I can't remember the last time I rifle hunted. And because I like the challenge, and I've had in the past, I've had the time. And again, that comes down to, we don't have to call it hunting. If it means those 3 kids are eating good quality meat and they're not having to spend, what would it cost to get 60 pounds of ground chuck? I don't know, a lot of money. So if he gets to provide that for his family, then we call it sustenance harvesting. I don't know, like call it whatever you want. Put meat on the table.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's such an old timey thing, so we're here talking about, AI and like drones and crazy stuff, and that to me is like homesteading. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
and the funny thing is that you're sitting in a cabin with a backdrop that's like mudded freaking like logs,
yeah.
like we
And
did
I've been
step
doing
back
it
in
all
time.
day on the western side of the house, is chinking this, using mortar to chink the western edge of this house. Um, and I have people stop just along the road. They'll come in here and be like, "Are you chinking this cabin?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "You're insane." And I'm like, I don't know. It just like seems like the right way to do it to me. Like I don't. I just I like these old like we've got a brand new house out in Stafford, Virginia that was not built this way, and I'm fine with it. But this is like, where I like chinking logs and tug and groove and, woodwork and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I guess again, it speaks that extremist in me.
So,
I
so
like both
please,
ends of the spectrum.
please tell me that while you're doing this, that you did end up getting your Cybertruck and that's parked right out front while you're doing
No,
that.
and my son's looking at me right now because I got my order for the Cybertruck like a month or two ago, saying I could purchase the Cybertruck, but I've been reading too many problems with them. There's been too many. I told my son I think it needs another year or two before I'm going to buy one. You know how it is with any new car. Like when they came out with the VW Bug, when they reissued the VW Bug, they had electrical problems for like 3 years. It's the same thing with the Cybertruck. I just think it needs 1 or 2 more years before it's something. And on top of that, my order was for a $70,000 Cybertruck, and for the same one that I ordered, it's now 140. So it doubled in price. Um, so I just want to give it 1 or 2 more years before I am going to get one. I'm getting a Cybertruck. I did a podcast with Derek Wolf. He's a hunter. He was a Super Bowl champion for the Broncos. He's uh, God in Denver for all intents and purposes. He got his Cybertruck just like a few weeks ago, and he took me for a ride in it when we went to go do a workout. That thing is so much fun. I mean, it is just more fun. It's like, when you get in a roller coaster and they take off super fast, like the ones that just shoot out like a cannon. That thing does like it does like 0 to 60 in like 4.7 or 4.6 seconds or something like that. And the thing weighs like 7,000 pounds. I mean, it's insane. It's an insane amount of fun. It's too much fun for a vehicle. And I probably said it the last time we talked about it, but every time I see one, I smile. And no vehicle does that to me except for like the 71 Ford Mach 1. But every time I see a Cybertruck, I smile. And so that to me is the vehicle I want to own. So a couple more years, I'll get one. And it will be parked out here.
Yeah, but I could just see you out there like slaving away with these logs and everything, and people are saying you're crazy, and then there's this freaking, stainless steel wedge parked out there.
Yeah,
Like,
stainless steel wedge that's got more like a million times more sophistication than the space shuttle that put the man on the moon. Bulletproof.
yeah.
Ran off of a solar array. I'm all about it. I love it. And then parked right by it will be my 1989 F-150, which was my first vehicle when I was 15. A 1989 F-150, rusted wheel wells, will be parked right next to it. So
So,
extremes.
so that they say like when you're out there, I just picture you like in your overalls, like sweating with a bandana on, and they're like, so I see the car was the owner here. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
so since we last talked, we've had some updates with Spartan Forge and stuff like that. The lidar that you talk about, I think it's the video that you were alluding to of like kind of showing how the deer use this one area, and then when you pull up the lidar, you can see that there's a funnel there. How does lidar work, and what that layer there, like what does it tell you aside from just like that like topo lines don't show you or whatever?
Sure. So LiDAR is the acronym is light detection and ranging. So what it does is it shoots non-visible light towards the Earth, out of spectrum, like stuff that we can't see, towards the Earth, and it's the wavelength allows it to penetrate trees and buildings, but it can penetrate the ground. Or you can tune it to penetrate the ground if you want, but they tune it to be reflected by the ground. So what it does is you know, you'll hear other apps talk about like leaf off imagery, which we have for half the US. We'll have it for the rest of the US here in a few months, but it's like tree off imagery and building off imagery. So we're on a normal topo, which like our competition will offer like 20 to 30 foot contour intervals, which will basically tell you instantaneous elevation sampled every 20 to 30 feet. So you'll get an elevation and then they draw a line. So on that, you can sometimes see benches, sometimes you can see saddles, things that in a perfect world might drive deer movement. But with LiDAR, you're now seeing all of the micro undulations and change in terrain that really show the whole picture, especially on our high res, which, you know, for about 80% of the US is high res, and we're working on getting the last 20% of it high res. But in that high res, you can see every little logging trail. You can see cattle trails. You can see the smallest of saddles, the smallest of undulations. You can see seeps. You can see really old walking trails that are no longer denoted on maps. What happens is there'll be a logging operation somewhere. They obviously are not populating a map with these logging trails. So you might have a whole hillside, 20,000 acres that's been logged. All of those trails that were cut are visible on LiDAR. And then what happens, as you know, with deer is they will reclaim those trails because they're easy to walk on. Does especially will use them. And when you see those trails intersect, you'll generally find scrapes, rub lines near them, where you might have to spend 3 or 4 days walking to find this trail system. You can identify them very quickly on these LiDAR maps, and then go check them out to once again inform your scouting and make your scouting a little smarter. So the light, as it penetrates the Earth's surface, shows all of those little contours in a way that's very useful. And like I said, I didn't even know if that reel that you're talking about was the big. I killed a big 6-pointer last year in that 1 week period I told you about. That 6-pointer had like 21 and a half inches inside spread. It was just like a giant 6-pointer. And I knew from where my tree stand was, where the stand I was going to sit, I knew deer always came from one area, and I never knew why they took like this one route in. It's just if they came from behind me, they always came from one angle. And so that morning I went in there, and I had a really bright red flashlight on my head, and I could see where I was going to. A ton of deer were coming off of some bait. I don't hunt bait unless I'm like taking my daughter or something like that, or I want to harvest a doe with my kids or something. But I keep bait there to get an inventory of the deer that are in the area, to keep them coming back to the area. And then I'll hunt off the bait, you know, maybe 100, 200 yards. I'll hunt funnels or sections or bedding or whatever that's near that. So I just decided that morning there was a blowdown that I would sit near this blowdown. And then I actually saw the does using this trail system that I didn't know was there. And then I saw a buck come in on it. And I shot that buck. And then when I popped the LiDAR up, which I just started using that year, I actually saw where there had been an old trail or an old logging path or something had been cut into these woods that went through everybody's property all the way to the road. And when I actually knew where it was and I could stand on the property and look, you could just see the faintest of trail where there were no trees growing. And it was just all of the deer used it. I think of it this way, and I'm not sure if this is the answer or not, but I think deer kind of use them as like like we use roads. Not that the path's necessarily easy, but that it's a break in the woods that they recognize. So they know when they hop this river and they walk, once there's a break, turn left at the break, and that brings you to the bait pile. So they use it as like a way to orient themselves in the woods. So again, I didn't know that till that morning. It wasn't evident to me because now I was actually seeing them come in instead of where my stand was, which I couldn't see them enter. I could just see where they were coming from. That morning, I actually could see them all using that same trail system. And sure enough, when I popped up Lidar, I saw it. And that is a good way to use Lidar to inform your scouting, because deer will use those natural trails and reclaim them after, whatever the reason is the trail was made dissipates, then the deer or animals will reclaim it.
Yeah, those old logging roads, and it's not just on the sides of mountains or anything like that. Like I've noticed them like in these swamps, when I pop it up. But I've got a question for you, and it kind of touches on something else that I think will be helpful for guys. I know it'll be helpful for me. So like you talked about going on an elk hunt, and you're going to be out in Montana. A lot of these areas are, you don't have any cell service or whatever. So we got to use our offline maps. How are you setting up your offline maps? And like within Spartan Forge, how does it work out with like saving the layers or whatever to be able to get the information that you need to make sure that it's in the offline map? Like, how are you setting yours up to have the information that you need when you're out there?
Yeah, so I do, if I have an area that I know I'm going to be hunting, like a small area where I know, like, here's where I'm going to be at least starting, I will download a very high resolution aerial, and I'll because you can pick the sizes. I'll download a high resolution aerial, and I'll download a high resolution LiDAR, and then I'll usually at the same area download a lower resolution aerial and a lower resolution LiDAR that's larger, like much larger, so I can kind of get a focus. And then I'll download a very large topo map. So that shows me like the roads around the area and all of that type of stuff. And then, so for me, any hunt where I know I'm offline, I'm downloading at least 4 or 5 maps. So we're actually going to fix that for next year so that you can, in the app, when you push your map layers button, you get that chip system where you can turn stuff on or off. We're going to make it so that your downloaded layer now will be a configurable map, just like you use it now. So instead of downloading different types of maps, you will just select an area and you will say, I want these features available and these maps available, and it'll just be one offline map. So that you can go in there and click the different views and you can turn things off and turn them on, just like you have service. So that's how I use it. And a couple of guys that I know that I consult with, trusted hunters that I work with a lot, like Garrett Pearl, do similar setups for their offline maps.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. I just didn't know if there was a way to kind of integrate some of that stuff within one map, or you had to do it like multiple times.
And we're doing that. So right now it's multiples. But we've built our own. The reason why we do the multiples actually is because Mapbox, which every mapping app uses right now, charges the companies per tile. So every tile that you download costs us money. And when you start talking about really large maps, it's thousands of tiles. So we've built our own map tile server. So we will be serving up our own imagery and our own mapping, and we won't need to use Mapbox. And when we do that, then we won't be charged for price per tile. We'll be using our own map tiling service and our own display. So you can do unlimited. Like if you want to download, like Northern Michigan, you can download Northern Michigan. The only restraint will be the amount of storage that you have on your phone.
Okay. I'm trying to think about other things, because like I said, I put this out to the so here's something that I had a question just on my own, right? So now, since kind of going back to the technology thing, since the advent of online mapping, right? So now we've opened up this whole new world to hunters, right? So before, you used to have to either know how to use a map and a compass. You used to have a spot in the woods and use night eyes or flagging tape or whatever. Used to have to know how to get in these spots, and there was a huge barrier of entry, right? And so now with the maps, with the breadcrumb, with all this stuff, as long as you have enough battery on your phone, you can, the world is your oyster as long as you're familiar with how to use the app. And now we've seen more again, and this might be just in a vacuum, pressure on the public lands, people going to the same places because the podcast, the YouTube, everybody has the same amount of information. Now we're putting in, your where Spartan Forge started with this predictive ideas of, okay, here's what the deer are going to be doing, right? And now you've got the Dan Infault saying, hey, now we got to hunt. I've always hunted by the parking lot, but now people are going way in. Now we have to come back. How long do you think it's going to take before the predictive model is going to change as far as like where these deer are going to be, where they used to be using these saddles, and now we've created too much pressure and they're going to shift? And then is your model going to be smart enough to identify that?
Yeah, so we get new deer data all the time. In fact, we just got a ton of Pennsylvania data the other day that we're using to update our model. That's the first part to answer that. And yes, the model will reflect that. And also, yes, I saw more mature buck movement through your traditional, like what you would call a saddle, and data from 2003. I would see a lot more pervasive buck movement versus 2017. So bucks certainly got educated and they changed their habits like a dog. If you train a dog to do something, it'll do it. That's the first part of your question. The second part, where we talk about public lands and we talk about the number of hunters, that to me is a two-pronged question. The first prong of that question is, the first way I would answer that question is, this will ebb and flow. Like there will be a number of the hunting numbers will go up. But then a certain amount of people will get their teeth kicked in, they won't be successful, or they'll figure out that this really wasn't for them. And then it will, ebb and flow back, back and forth naturally. But then the second part to that question is the same thing that we talked about before. Once we get this number of hunters increases, I see it as a good thing, because we should be voting. Those people should be voting, and they should be voting to make sure their representatives are acquiring or retaining public land, and also getting smarter with the advent of technology on how we manage it. And it's actually something I'm doing with Spartan Forge. I'm trying to talk to some DNRs this off season using a free version of the app to help better manage things like block management, things like public land, things like BMA. I'm sorry, I just said that. Things like BLM. With technology now, and the fact that something like 97% of Americans have smartphones, we need to update the way that we apportion and allow access for everyone to public land. But we can be smarter with how we manage that access, and make sure that it's being acquired dutifully, so that we aren't getting private, or we're not getting public land that's being surrounded by outfitters that are blocking access. Like, that is ridiculous. But then also that this new cohort of hunters, and the numbers as they increase, are voting to make sure that that representatives aren't selling lands or getting rid of them, or that if they are, that there's going to be some kind of access built in, like they do in PA, where they sell it to logging companies or coal or oil companies, that there's still access provided for hunters. That's to say that we need to keep vote. People need to vote. People need to get out and get into voting and get involved more with their local body politic than they are with the national body politic. We really shouldn't care about the president. Like, until 50 years ago, the federal president, it didn't really affect anybody because their powers were so limited. But we've granted the federal government now so much power that now people are getting involved. And I hope that will change too. But for the meantime, what that means is we as hunters need to vote and make sure that our representatives aren't selling out public lands, and that there's still public lands for us to enjoy, and that the number and the amount of public lands grows commensurately with the number of hunters. So, I mean, that to me is kind of like how I would tackle that issue. Again, but then I guess the third part to that is, and I'm going to get hate for this, I know it. Feel free to cut this into a reel. and put it online because it's going to get a ton of engagement. At least the last time I said something like this, it did. I was on the We Are Hunter podcast, and I said something along the lines of, if you're a killer in PA, you probably can be a killer anywhere. If you're a Johnny Stewart, he can look at a deer wrong and they'll lay down and die. Like, I mean, the guy is just, I've been hunting with him now for 4 years, and the amount of knowledge and embodied knowledge, and he knows more about the deer woods than anybody I've ever met, period. Maybe except for Joe Martonic, who's Bo's father. And he has his own names for like plants. He doesn't know the actual like scientific name of it, but he knows deer eat them in January. And he'll be like, oh yeah, that's like that pink flower. It's the deer won't touch they depetal, and it's just like a little herb. And the deer won't touch them, but then all of a sudden in January, they're all over them. So I made that comment on the We Are Hunter podcast about if you're a killer in PA, on public land in PA, you can kill anywhere. I didn't say that people in Michigan suck at hunting, or people in Florida suck at hunting, or people in North Carolina suck at hunting. But I got probably 500 messages from people saying, well, you've obviously never been to Vermont, and you've obviously never been to Maine. And to some of them, I was like, well, actually, I have hunted up there, and like, they're good killers too. And I could have made that same comment about people from Maine. If you kill 150-inch deer every year in Maine, you probably can kill a 150-inch deer anywhere. Like, once you have that level of knowledge about the whitetail, it doesn't matter where you are. You're going to figure it out. And plus, it reflects a level of dedication where even if they don't know when they get there, they're going to know in a week. So that was my point. I got more hate and more messages and more Instagrams and more unsubscribes, and like, it was crazy. So I preface all of that to say my next statement about your question. I'm trying. I got to take it all the way back to what your question was now. I hunt in PA, North Dakota. Every year I hunt in PA, North Dakota, public grounds. PA, North Dakota, Georgia, with the exception of the last few years. But I have been, last year I did, and this year I will. And in Maryland. All of those places, if you go on the bow hunting forums, are constantly complaining about seeing other hunters. I've never seen another hunter in PA. Walking into public in PA, I've not one time seen another hunter. If I have, it's been people driving on the roads. But when I'm going up into stands, I've never had someone walk by my stand. I'm going to get shit on for this. I know I'm going to, but it's the truth. In North Dakota, I've never walked into a spot in North Dakota and seen someone at a spot. I might see some people at like the parking lot, but like, once I'm in my tree or I'm back where I'm at, I think I can count on my hand as how many times I've actually seen someone. And that used to be where I would hunt 4 to 7 days a week, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. If I had an hour after work, I was in the tree, especially during the rut. If I had 45 minutes and I was getting off of work at 4 p.m. and the sun was down at 5:45, I was climbing a tree. I never saw people. So like, I understand that in certain areas, maybe there might be a lot of hunters, but I would say if you're hunting in those areas, find other public where those people aren't there. I'm not trying to be cruel or not sensitive to people's needs or anything like that, because I know people, I can see the messages, but all I'm saying is there's a lot of public out there. And like in PA alone, like you can get lost in the PA public. Like, you can walk for days. And it's vast and it's huge. I mean, North Dakota is another one. Like, the public out here is insane. So, I mean, I still think that we're not at that critical mass. Now, someone is going to say, well, you need to come hunting in Ohio. Well, I do hunt in Ohio. I hunt in Southern Ohio. And the spots that Johnny and I hunt in Southern Ohio, again, 3 years I've hunted there. I've never seen anybody in the woods. So, but I do get it. I know that there are people seeing other people in the woods. All I would say is, if you're seeing other people in the woods, change it up or do something differently or go to a different place. And you can go to a place where you're not going to see anyone. I know I'm going to get crapped on about this, but it is the truth. I'm speaking the truth. I've seen nobody in PA. We've hosted a veterans hunt 2 years in PA where we found spots and scouted spots and nobody sees other hunters. The only intrusion I might get is from a homeowner if I'm too close to a house, or a logging company or something like that. But otherwise, I'm just not seeing people.
So it's
What are
easy
your
to hunt.
thoughts on that?
It's easy to hunt in PA is what Bill Thompson said, right?
No, I didn't say it's easy to hunt PA. Because I'll also go 5 days without seeing a deer. And that is the thing about PA that people can't wrap their heads around, is if you know what you're doing and you know how to scout, you can sit. If you sit a good rut funnel for 7 days, you can see your buck. You'll get the chance. But you need to have 4 days where you're not seeing a damn thing. But that buck will be through there if you've done the scouting right. But people can't handle that swing. I was just listening to Steve Shirk, who's a guide out there in PA, talk about this on Bowhunter Tonics podcast. And he says that oftentimes, because runs an outfit, he's an outfitter, he will put people when they first get there in places where he knows there aren't big deer, just so they can see deer, just so they get the good feelings going. Because he says, like, his biggest problem is someone has said they want to kill a 150-inch buck. And he's like, are you sure that's what you want to do? Because I've got a 150-inch buck, but you need to sit there for at least 3 or 4 days before we can rule out if that buck's there. And people on day 2 are like done. They're like, I can't do a third all day sit. Like, I'm done. I can't do it. So you got to be used to not seeing anything for a while and have faith in your setup and what you're doing. That buck will come by. PA is tough.
But I think to answer your question is say, like, what's my take on it? As I think it kind of wraps back around to, like, you kind of answered my question as far as, like, are these deer adjusting to the hunter pressure? Because all of these things, right, all of these tools that we now have put hunters, or we've conditioned hunters to say, okay, we have to go a mile back. We have to find a saddle. We have to find a leeward ridge, or, these rut funnels or whatever. And then, so you get, guys from 3 different states and end up in the exact same X that have never met each other, never seen anybody. And, we've got guys around here who spots we've hunted for years and years and years. And then you have some guy from out of state come stumble in and say, well, I just, saw it on the app and looked like a good spot. And it's like, yeah, it's been a good spot for 10 years, but nobody's ever been here because of that. And so kind of like what you're saying is that you have to adjust to that and change your thinking. And it's interesting because the last few podcasts that I've done we have been talking about these out of state hunts, these 5-day hunts, these 6-day hunts, and trying to be, extremely mobile or go in, read the sign and get to the hot sign area, because I guess we don't have that patience, or haven't done all the work ahead of time when we're going in looking for the most recent information, instead of saying, okay, we have cameras, we know that this deer's here, we just got to sit and wait on them. So I think that it's kind of like one and the same, right?
Yeah, it's the reason why I'm a scrape hunter, and I've always been a scrape hunter. And after seeing the GPS data and knowing what I know about deer, I'll always be a scrape hunter. Bucks always will make scrapes. Bucks will always make scrapes near doe bedding. The difference that people, and I've seen it myself because I do these veterans hunts where I'll take guys who are successful hunters in their own rights, but now they're not hunting Iowa, they're hunting PA, or they're hunting Georgia, where there's pressure, especially PA, where there can be pressure, or the deer react to pressure, or the deer are more sparse. And they'll be like, well, I saw this, there's a scrape. You're saying the scrape is over here. Like, let's go hunt the scrape. And my thing is, like, in low pressure areas, that might be the key. But for me, I'm hunting 40 to 80 yards off of scrapes. I think about that. I look at the predominant winds. Again, I'm not plugging my app, but I look at the predominant winds in Spartan Forge, and I see, okay, during the month of November, it's primarily a northwest wind, 7 to 10 miles an hour, 60% of the time. So now I look at that scrape and I say, if I'm a buck who might work this scrape once or twice because he's cruising and he's just looking for does. Where is the cover that will allow me to scent check this scrape without being seen? Like, he'll never work it. Or if he does work it, it might be once or twice at night. But he is going to scent check it. And so people, at least the guys that I deal with, or whenever I'm showing people spots or taking people to my old spots, because I've had people message me and I send them old spots in Maryland. Actually, guy sent me a podcast where he was doing a veterans hunt, and I sent him one of my best spots in Maryland, and a guy killed on day 3 in one of my best spots in Maryland. And he sent me the podcast saying, hey, like, this veteran that you gave me this spot to killed a deer on day 3. And it was awesome. And thank you. So it was good to hear that podcast. But that spot and other spots like it, you can't see the scrape that you're hunting. It's too far away. And you'll see bucks working the scrape. People will be like, like this guy. I'm thinking of one guy right now from 2 years ago. He's like, dude, I saw bucks, like there were like 2.5-year-old bucks working that scrape. And I'm like, if you want to kill a 2.5-year-old buck, go hunt the scrape. What I'm telling you is the does that are hitting that licking branch or that are bedded near that scrape, the buck's only interested in catching estrus. So he's going to be, I've located the cover that's near the predominant wind, that's 80 to 100 yards off that scrape. And that is what I'm hunting, that cover. And that in a pressured scenario for me personally has been much more successful. That's how I killed my buck. That buck I just described to you, that 6-pointer, was off of a scrape. He did work that scrape that day, but that was only because it was private land. So that flip for people, like if you want to kill like I told this guys, like if you want to kill a 2.5-year-old deer, go sit that scrape. If you want that 150 I showed you a picture of, you need to be sitting this faint ass trail that is in the only hemlocks that are downwind of that scrape predominant area, that's on a small bench that's off of where that scrape sits, or you'll never see that scrape. And you're going to have to sit there for 6 or 7 days. Like, you might, if you're lucky, you'll kill on day 2 or day 3. But if you can do that, you're going to have a 150-inch deer on the wall. But most people, when you tell them that, they're like, yeah, I can do it. And then by day 3, they're like, I'm done. I haven't seen a deer the whole time. The only deer I've seen have been 100 yards away. Like, I'm just going to go in and shoot like a buck. It's like, okay, that's fine, dude. But like, you were the guy who said I wanted a 150-inch deer on day 1. And I'm telling you what it takes to kill a 150-inch deer on public land. That's what it takes. So, that, at least that's a successful thing for me. And I say that story, I tell that whole story as an answer to the tactics do change, and the funnels and the way deer use them do change. But the other thing I'll say about that big saddle, that guy who's using, a mapping app to find that saddle, in the past, big bucks might have been using that saddle or walking through that saddle. Now the big bucks are scent checking that saddle because there are does and small bucks that are still using it. So now you have to ask yourself, if the wind's like this today, where is there cover and thick foliage that holds through the fall that would make it conducive to this buck scent checking this area without actually going and participating in the scrape? Go find a faint trail in there and sit that. That's the change that I feel a lot of people, especially young hunters, have a hard time making that commitment, because it is a commitment.
How do you make that commitment? I mean, because I feel like, again, we're in a microwave society where we want DoorDash. We don't even want to microwave it anymore. We just want to show up and we're all ready and set to go. So it's like I think you have to, and I think it probably answers some of the questions that some of the Patreons had and they wanted brought up about the boots on the ground and kind of learning these lessons the hard way. And I think about, and one of the comments that was made was, a lot of my successes have been hard fought, and that's why I hold them dear. That's why I'm very proud of it, because it was hard to do. And so in that type of scenario, you think back and all the times that you got busted or like that, things have gone wrong, or that you were sitting on that scrape and then all of a sudden you look up and then, I think if you've hunted long enough and you've been in a situation where there's big bucks, you've made that mistake. You're sitting on the scrape and then you hear a twig crack or something, and you turn around and you're just pegged by the deer of a lifetime, and you're like,
yeah, the buck who was scent checking that scrape
Yeah.
from far off.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, but how do you teach that patience, or how do you teach? Because I think that's the hard part, even for me in that scenario, is like, if you don't know the deer is there, like if you don't know that there's a 150 on the property or whatever, how do you keep knocking your head against the wall for 7 days? Seeing deer and all that. How do you impart that patience or whatever?
Yeah. So again, all long answers, but it's got to be, because it's the only way to treat it correctly. And for your Patreon users, I want to give them the exact right answer. And the first thing is self-reflection. Like, you actually have to sit down and examine your value hierarchy and say, have I killed enough deer? Do I have enough meat in the freezer? Am I secure enough with myself that I am going to roll the dice on an extremely mature animal? And that is actually my highest value. Because for me, I will kill does right away in the season. I will get meat in the freezer right away. And then once I do that, then I open myself up to track a trophy animal or selectively kill an old buck. Like that. I don't know if you saw that public PA buck I killed last year. He was 12 years old. That buck had been getting hunted in that area by everyone and his mother. And at one point he was like 160, 170 inches. It was a myth in that area. But the self-reflection required to sit down and say to yourself, am I just going to kill the first like 110 I see? And if that's the case, then that's fine. That's where you're at in your journey as a hunter. And you can be at that stage until you're 70. And that's fine. Like, that's good. Like, yourself. Like, the hardest thing to do, I think it was Cicero or someone said, it's far easier to govern a city than it is to govern yourself. And what that means is, do you actually know what you're made of? And like, when you're put to the test, what your highest value is? So I would tell hunters, or if I were giving someone advice, I would say, sit down and think to yourself, what is your highest value? Is it that huge buck? If you can't sit for 6 days and wait for that buck, if you haven't done the homework and you know that trail is there, and you know that scrape is there, and you know that buck's around, and now you just know you're going to have to wait, and you know that your way into the stand is good and your way out of the stand is good, and it's just a waiting game. If your highest value is that mature buck, then you will make that wait. If you quit by day 2 or day 3, then you have to admit to yourself that, at least on an existential level of analysis, the way that you act in the world is actually who you are and not what you say. So if you quit on day 2, then that wasn't your highest value. That would be my first thing, is true self-reflection. And there's nothing wrong with killing spikes or does and being done with your season and being happy and content with that, and then rolling the dice and having some fun hunts. Maybe we're going after a bigger buck. Like, just do that, dude. But if you really have that itch to kill like a public land buck with a longbow at 15 yards, and there's multiple ways to do it. The one that is successful for me, that's worked for me, and I've killed maybe 15 or so mature bucks. There's some on the wall over there that I'm looking at right now, that required 5 or 6 days of sitting in the same spot. And at the end here, I'll quickly tell a story about a veteran that I was taking hunting a few years ago. But if it's truly your highest value, then you will act it out in the world. It's like saying, are you devoted to your wife? And all the guys, most men will say yes. But then, the first time a woman looks at them some way or whatever, they engage with that woman and they act something out. And you can say, well, that person says that their highest value is their wife, but they're not acting that way. Or a person says they're a Christian, or but then they're stealing money from their company. Well, they say that, but they don't act that way. So they're actually not that way. They're just telling themselves they're that way. It's the same thing with, if you're done on day 3 in the big woods of PA and you don't want to wait around. And I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but I am saying, if you're limited on time and you've done your scouting, that is one way to do it, no matter what. Not no matter what. No, I'm sorry. It's the highest percentage of success in my mind. So do that self-examination first. And then the second thing is the planning and the preparation and the discipline that is required to isolate and do all of the variable analysis involved with finding that community scrape, knowing where the doe's bed around it, knowing what the predominant wind is, knowing how you're going to get in and get out undetected. That takes work. And again, if once you've done that self-examination, are you doing the preseason work? Are you going and hanging the summer sets? Are you the cameras? Are you going in March when the leaves are still off the trees and looking at what scrapes were there the year before, or how things might have shifted? Do you know actually where the doe's bed? Do you have pictures of the does? Do you have an inventory of the buck to doe ratio in the area? Do you understand how much daylight cruising there might be based on what that doe to buck ratio is? And then have you identified that cover? For me, I identify 3 sets of cover based off the top 3 predominant winds. So when November comes, I know, all right, I need a northwest, I need a true north stand, and then on the warm days, there might be a southeast wind. So I need a southeast one. Now, where is all the cover near this community scrape that accounts for that, and have identified the faint deer trails, the faint buck trails that will go through there? And I have selected the trees or looked at the right trees that have their own cover. Have I mapped all of that out and thought about it? If you haven't, or you're not willing to do it, then your highest value is not killing a really big buck, which again is fine. But you ask the question, like, what does it take? So, and all of that preparation and all of that pre-work, it is rewarding your future self. So you're doing work for yourself in the future, which a lot of people have a hard time doing. That's why we have so many morbidly obese people, because they're not willing to put off something they want for a better future. So they're dying from a heart attack at 42 because they kept eating the Cheetos. So, yeah. And so you're rewarding, and then have that concept of the off-season scouting, the post-season scouting. You're rewarding your future version of yourself because your highest value is killing a big buck. Now you've done that work. You've done all of that work, all of that research, that studying, that boot leather, the cameras, the maps, the looking at it, the ingress, the egress, all of that. Now, are you going to honor that sacrifice? And honoring that sacrifice looks like is looking at what the wind's going to be for the week of the rut that you have off, to have all of the backups built in, to have all of those egresses and ingress, or all of those ins and outs planned. Have you done all of that variable analysis, and are you ready? And if you are, then spend your 7 days. You'll be successful a lot more. And then once you're successful, and I'll say that too, and then I'm done with my long ass answer, is once you're successful doing that one time, it gets so much easier to do it the next time. Like once you've seen it work, then it's like a snowball. It picks up its own momentum, and then it becomes a lot easier and a lot easier to do. And I'm not saying I always hunt 7 days. Like obviously, if I'm pulling cameras and the doe concentration is not there that was there the year before, or acorns are falling somewhere else, then I will shift. But now, have you done the homework to know, okay, there's been an acorn crop on a different ridge. The acorn crop that you scouted the year before is not there this year. So now you need to find those does that are near acorns where that another community scrape is. And do you know about that? And have you done the homework? If you have, then you're again paying your future version of yourself that's going to be hanging that buck on the wall. So once you've done all of that, you've done the preparation, then now it comes time for the commitment that it takes to see it through. And I think if you talk to most guys like the Steve Shirks, the Bo Martonics, the Lee Ellises, like the guys who've had year after year success, they'll tell you it all happens in the pre and the postseason. It happens with the cameras. It happens with the boot leather. It happens with the intelligence, with knocking on doors and asking for access. It happens with all of that. And if you're not willing to do any of that, then your highest value isn't killing a big buck. Or if it is, you can exchange all of that time. Because think about it this way. As an engineer, if I went to work for a company, I'd charge them $150 an hour for my time. I might spend 100 hours doing all of this for a public land buck. I could just go to Texas and pay $10,000 or $8,000 and have all of that work time back. And that's fine. Like people poo-poo on that, right? Like I know a lot of like investors in my company and other people, millionaires and billionaires, where if they took a week off from work, it might kill their company, or it might kill their paycheck, or it might, they really are, but they still love hunting. So they're going to go pay $5,000 at a ranch in Texas, and then public land hunters judge them. And it's like, dude, all of that time and effort and hours, like log all of those. You're also paying $5,000 for that public land buck. You just haven't done the math. Like and I've never done an outfitted hunt before. I'm not saying I'm gonna, that we all should be doing it. All I'm saying is your time is the only thing that you truly have in this world, and that time has a value on it per hour, and that's what you charge companies when you work for them. So do that analysis and say, I spent 80 hours, 90 hours, 100 hours last year scouting for bucks and spending time away from my little ones. Maybe I'm not going to spend time away from my 4-year-old this year, and I'm going to go spend $3,000 on an outfitted hunt and go hunt for 4 days and then have that time with my kids until they're older. And again, it's this social media thing where people will go online and be like, oh yeah, my buddy who goes and pays for a tag and goes and does blah, 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 blah. And it's like, shut up. Like someone else, we're trading hours, and our hours are worth time, and we're all going to die. So we only have so many hours. Like, let's not judge people. He's hunting. He's buying a tag. He's helping conservation. He's putting venison on the table. He's putting antlers on the wall. A guy has a job that had to go and scout for that deer. The outfit has to hire people. The taxes have to go to the state. Like, can we stop shitting on people? Like, and again, I've never hunted a white-tailed deer outfit, and I probably never, or maybe I will. And actually, I know I will one day. But again, like the public land hunter who spends 100 or 200 hours scouting versus the CEO that has 10,000 people in his company, I know by name, and I can't say them, and it sucks. I can tell you after the call, but I know by name billionaire CEOs that go and hunt the most exclusive places, and they kill massive whitetails. They kill all of these animals, but they'll never, ever, ever say it or put it on social media because they're afraid of the woke mob. And these are guys that are billionaires and millionaires. Names that you would know if I said them, who I'm friends with people who are friends with them, and they go hunting with them. But they don't, this guy is a super famous tech CEO that doesn't have 40 hours to go and scout for deer, but he still wants to go whitetail hunt. So he's going to go buy a tag in Texas and go kill a deer. Good on you. Like, good. Excellent. You still got to pull the trigger.
Well, it seems like it's founded in that, because I mean, look at what Papa John, right? Just ostracized, like, because he's a hunter, right? So what do you?
Yeah,
what are
same
you
with the guy who owns. When I was at NWTF, I got invited to a party that was hosted by the guy who owns Jimmy John's, and he's a huge hunter too. But he never posts anything about it or does anything about it, and I don't know him. That's why I name dropped him right there. But the guy's a massive hunter. And again, the owner of Jimmy John's, like a $3 billion company, can't take a month off to go scout Maine public woods. You can't do that. There's no way. It's not possible. So, again, if there's a narrative for this podcast, it's just like, let's just fix ourselves. Like, let's all decide how we are all inadequate as individuals and fix ourselves and just concentrate on being the best hunter that we can be, and not focus on things we can't control, which is other people or what other people do, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, hell, we could end on that. I think the information in here is like incredible, from like the hunting stuff to like the AI, like where technology is taking us. I think it's been some really good, like two-sided conversation, where we're thinking through things instead of just, spouting off and saying, oh, well, of course it's going to be this way or one way or the other. I mean, there is so much diversity in the hunting community, and we just choose not to embrace it. We would rather, do the 13 pieces. And I think that truly that's the main thing that we're dealing with. And it's funny that you say that about like a billionaire, right? Because I feel like that's a whole nother category, because there is like a level of expectation. Like you would never, I would never expect to see a guy like that roaming, maybe out west, maybe public land, Arizona, you know, super expensive elk unit tag. But other than that, like you're not going to see somebody bombing around Michigan or PA, you know, on public land. It's just not. It isn't efficient. And I think that there's a realistic level of expectation there. And I think, you know, kind of what you said and how you outlined all of that, like where your priorities are, is kind of right in line with that. And I think it is 100% like there's a different level of expectation for these different people. And, you know, as you get down to like weapons and all this stuff, I mean, there's a reason that there's a lot of like cliches and stereotypes in hunting, and it's because they're all real. They're all real people. You know, there is the crossbow hunter, the rifle hunter, the I will need to get my buck guy, the Sitka guy. I mean, like you go across, you name it, and they're all real. But I think that you're 100% right in the fact that it's all, you know, unite or die.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I mean, it's also that unfortunately that's becoming the narrative for our country right now too. We need to figure our shit out and start tolerating people that are, oh look, I just got a thumbs up from the screen for that one. We need to get our shit together and start tolerating people, because we've really built our culture into this like one side versus the other. And we got to get past that crap, because you know, I think it was Lincoln that said a house divided unto itself cannot stand. And you know, I'm not trying to end this on a somber note, but we need to get this country back to like 1996, where people didn't care about federal politics, and if they did, you never talked about it, or if you did, no one cared. I've lost friends over my politics in the past 5 years. You know, I had a guy call me. What podcast did I do? I don't remember the podcast, but he listened to it afterwards. He said, "Hey, I listened to you on so and so. Like, do you really feel that way, or is that just something you were saying for like that podcast?" And I was like, "No, it's 100% how I feel." And he's like, "Really?" And then I just watched our relationship atrophy. And then finally one night, he and I had gone to the same like get together, and he got a couple of drinks in him. He's like, "You know, man, actually, you know, I think about it, people like you are the problem." And I'm like, "All right, sweet. Like, let's go. Keep it going. I want to hear more. Please do tell." And, you know, that's where we are now. And like, we can't be doing that in the hunting community. It doesn't serve anyone. We're going to be fighting with each other while we lose our rights to be hunters and be outdoorsmen. And it's like, that guy with the crossbow is not the problem. Should he be made fun of? Maybe. But is he the problem? No. He's hunting. And should be there a separate season? Maybe. I don't know. I'm of two minds about it. But also, I'm not a crossbow hunter, so I don't care. So, you know, if I were a crossbow hunter, I might care more. If I had like a shoulder injury or something, I couldn't pull a bow, I might care more. But I'm not going to judge anyone, certainly not publicly. I've got too much to fix on my own.
Yeah, and I'll 100% agree that where we, you know, and it's always fun to poke fun at crossbow hunters. I think it's, I mean,
people should poke fun at me. They're going to,
like,
I'm sure of it.
But at the same time, they're, you know, you say they're buying a license, they're out there, they're doing something that we all love. And, you know, it's not your buck, it's not your deer. It's, you know, everybody's land, you know, unless they're trespassing or something like that. So, you know, we can't let, every time the more infighting we have, the more it allows other people to prey upon that. And especially now with, you know, again, back to any of the AI computer stuff, like, you know, there's so much disinformation, misinformation, that it's easy when you see people fighting for the anti-hunter to like leverage all of that and take something that was said in jest about crossbow hunters and make it, you know, that's the whole narrative. This is how the whole world feels and everything. And there's never any retraction. So, you know, just I like your thoughts saying, you know, that we need to, you know, kind of look inside ourselves and say, you know, what could we be doing better instead of, you know, just putting other people down. So yeah, I really enjoyed like the banter and the conversation. With Spartan Forge, you know, your elevator pitch for the end for anybody who, you know, hasn't made the leap yet or explored it, you know, just kind of end with that.
Yeah, so we have we just put out Cyber Scout. We put out a new map interaction too, where you can load preset maps, which a lot of people seem to like. Some people still have to figure it out, but you got to hit that map button. We're gonna make it a little simpler here in the next update too. But when you hit the map button, you know, you go to the map, then you hit the maps layers button. It's the second time you hit the same button. You can configure your maps. You can preset the maps, and then you can turn on the compass swiper in the 3-line menu. We used to have a compass swiper on for everyone, but I get a lot of people that say I don't like the compass swiper, and I just normally accidentally hit it, so I don't like it. So we made it an option that you can turn on in the 3-line menu. Those updates just dropped, along with Cyber Scout, which is a large language model that's trained on our own internal, what I call truth data, peer-reviewed scientific studies, science, primitive technology, camping, outdoors, fishing, hiking, shooting. You can use it to build your own gun. You can learn anything from it that you want to learn about the outdoors, and you won't get any of the woke BS in it because it's our own model. And then our next update will update the entire US to 2023 imagery on the Sat-1 layer here in the coming weeks. And then right after that, we'll be doing historical imagery, I think first for 5 years and then later for 10 or 12 years. For all of the US. And then after that, we'll be doing a solar flux layer where you can see where sunlight, you know, if you're scouting late season and you want to know where the sun is hitting the ground for most of the day, you'll be able to figure that out. There'll be aspect shading where you can see, like you drop a pin, you can see where you see on the ground. And there's a couple of other features that I'm forgetting about. But anyway, we're very aggressive on feature releases. There's a bunch there already, and we're doing a bunch more. So yeah, you know, check it out at SpartanForge.ai. I know there's a Bowhunter code, so you can use that code, and it ends up being $42 for the year, which is you can't buy anything for $42 for the year right now. And we're trying not to raise that price, although it's getting hard. I think I'll be able to make it through this year without raising the price, but with the way that margins are going and the amount that we're being charged for our software and hosting and stuff, we might have to at some point, but we're still half the price of most of our competitors. When you buy the whole suite of features for all 50 states, we'll probably offer a state-by-state one for next year, because I do get people asking me about it. And yeah, that's, and then we've got a bunch of web stuff that we've released too that I haven't talked about: side-by-side mapping, Eagle Eye, which is like it tilts the camera to a 45-degree angle for anywhere that we have UAV, so you can like see imagery from the side instead of directly over top. There's the pin import stuff in there, and a bunch of other stuff we're doing on the web as well. So that's to say, there's a lot. All we're doing is mobilizing the money that we're making with the app to make it a better app. Whereas I think you see a lot of these other apps offering the same old features for the past 12 years. That will not be the case with us. So people can check it out. And if you DM me on Instagram, you'll get me. I answer all of the DMs. And then I was going to say, lastly, the last thing I was going to say is, it seemed like you had a lot of questions from your Patreon. So if your Patreon ever wanted to do like a group session where we all get together, like I've been working, your podcast is the first one I think I sponsored, or maybe second. And it's the one we've been working with the longest. I think you and maybe Eric Clark from OKS Hunter, I think, are the longest two that we've been with and will continue to be with. So if your Patreon, ever want to do like a get together where we all just shoot the shit and answer questions, or if they have more questions that didn't get answered, I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I really enjoyed the banter and all that, and there's some really good stuff in there. So Bill, I really appreciate it, you taking the time, and good luck on that elk hunt.
Thanks for having me, Adam. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks.